We only have about 40 minutes, so we're going to skip the introductions. Just quickly, what Tech.eu is. I'm the founder of Tech.eu. We talk about, or we write about European innovation, European startups. I've been doing that for the last 10 years or so, previously with publications like TechCrunch and S.Schwab. And I think it's very easy to say that a lot has changed in the last decade. A lot of it for the better, some of it for the worse. The things that we've been tracking a lot is the stuff that you can quantify. Deals, funding, M&A transactions, exits are all really heading in the right direction. No matter what the usual narrative is about European entrepreneurship, the numbers actually show that everything's going in the right direction. It's only when you start comparing those numbers, and I think someone else mentioned this on a previous panel, size doesn't matter or does matter depending on the context, but we always compare the numbers with Silicon Valley or the US or Asia or up and coming emerging economies. And I think that's maybe not the right way of looking at Europe's competitiveness. But that's the discussion that we're going to have. It's about entrepreneurship, which is a very, very broad term. This is going to be mainly about tech entrepreneurship, digital, early stage startups. How can we help them? How can we help more of them get started? And how can we help the successful ones scale more quickly and into huge, viable, global category leaders. So that's a discussion that we're going to have. It's an interesting mix. If you look at the panel, we have an entrepreneur, member of European Parliament, we have an investor, and we have someone from the corporate side. So maybe we're going to start over on the left side. Sven, are you optimistic about Europe's chances to become, a real category leader in certain verticals when it comes to digital?
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm representing Next 47, which is a new unit, a new group established by Siemens, and we are worldwide present. So we have a team in Asia, we have one in Berkeley, we have since July one in Tel Aviv, and we are here in Europe. So I have the opportunity and possibility to make comparisons and to see what's going on in the different regions of the world, and also to compare the companies. And what I must say is we shouldn't be shy about the quality of the companies, about the quality of the startups that come out of Europe. They are different in style, they are different in origin often, but with that they are representing the strength of Europe as a strong region. And therefore, if we do things right, if we focus on what we are strong in, and if we don't try to just copy Silicon Valley or some other ecosystem, but try to find our own recipe, then I'm very positive and optimistic.
Mr. Schwab, do you agree with that assessment from policy side?
What should I say? I mean, first of all, it's important to be self-confident and to see the differences that Europe can offer to other parts in the world. But if we are looking more closely to the problems that we observe, I think it's obvious that either in China or in the US, the access to finance is much easier and the scalability of businesses as well. And I think we can show that with some examples. We have seen a lot of small and medium-sized businesses in the digital world that have been quite successful, that had very innovative ideas, but then went to the US either for a better scalability or for more money to be raised for them. And I think these are two key concerns that we have to face in the European Union, where we should be positive about, but where we also should see what we can do. Because I think at global level, these are conditions that don't change in Europe that fast as they should.
Access to investment is one of the elements that comes up quite a bit. We've done quite a lot of research on the challenges faced by European entrepreneurs over the years. And it's sort of shifted. We still talk about this problem of access to capital, but it's no longer at the early stage. Things like crowdfunding and angel investors teaming up and becoming formal organizations and incubators, accelerators have kind of almost filled that gap. It's more when you look at Series B, Series C, when you're really scaling a company on a global level, it starts getting tricky to find the right amount of investment here in Europe. But does it really matter where that investment comes from? Once you get to that point, does it really matter where the money comes from? Maybe Bart, you can ask that question.
No, it doesn't matter. No, and
okay, next.
Next question. Now, but I think you're right that it's quite shifting. I think we're at a point where in Europe you see that there's a different kind of ecosystem being created around financing. As you say, crowdfunding fills for some company a gap, and then the next phase in crowdfunding is actually a platform where angel investors team up, and the role of funds also become different. And I think it's the beginning of quite a shift, and a shift in which I think we should, it's not so much the amount of money, but it's the speed in which financing rounds get done. That's one. And it has to be accompanied by, I think, a vital element, which is access to not only funding to scale, but teams to scale. In Europe, we don't have a lot of success stories yet. I had the pleasure once of living some time in San Francisco and LA. And what you see is that the teams that are doing an amazing job is technological, but we have quite some good technological teams over in Europe. What we lack a lot is people that are really great in scaling on the sales and on the positioning and marketing side, and that comes with experience. I think it's a cycle that will happen, but we're now in the phase that European companies or startups getting larger, getting funded, and the next phase is they're getting bigger and go IPO or get acquired, and all the people in that company, entrepreneurs, go where they want to go, which is keep on entrepreneuring. So, and if there's something that would help a lot is accelerating that phase, accelerating the access to capital, but also the access to the teams.
Well, we have a startup founder on the panel, so we're going to take advantage of that. Have you had any trouble accessing finance, or hasn't it been an issue so far?
It was a very timely conversation. So we're a London-based startup, and there are elements of everything that's been said that I want to put together in our own experience. And we're in the middle of a financing round, and that's in brackets an advertisement for any investors out there. But we, in all seriousness, so we're in a very good place to, I think, sort of we're feeling this, we're right at the coal face. And we have a technology that is pretty sophisticated, and the market potential is enormous. But it takes a little bit of vision to see that. So if we had revenue and lots of revenue and walked up to an investor and said, now I want money, they're not doing anything special. They're sort of acting as a bank rather than as a true VC. I don't think we're seeing a lot of that vision in Europe. And so from the very early days, most of our conversations were in the Valley. Now we're also getting a lot of interest from China. And I think those are the two superpowers that we inevitably have ended up playing with. In Europe, the conversations are always very small fry. They're not as aggressive as aggressive, really. And I think that's a shame. And I think there are exceptions. There are exceptions like what Siemens is doing now with Next 47. And I think both parts of that chain are missing. So the scalability, working with partners to really push the sales pipeline, and the fund access to finance. But they're missing.
So when we discussed the life cycle of a startup, for some reason in a lot of conversations, the corporate sides get left out. Either they have a venture capital arm and they invest, or they don't get mentioned at all. But you kind of see that shift changing. The industry is kind of more open to collaboration these days than they used to be. So you see a lot of different initiatives. Some start accelerators, some are very active in M&A, some do different things, organize hackathons or events, whatever. So I want to know, what does Siemens specifically do to help startups live up to their potential?
Yeah, for Siemens, startups are extremely important. On the one hand side, Siemens is a great company. We have 360,000 people worldwide. We make 80 billion euro revenue. And we have a very strong focus in attractive markets. We are focused on electrification, automation, and digitalization. And the good news is that all these markets are attractive, they are growing, they are profitable. The bad news is all these markets are changing, and they are structurally changing, and nobody really knows how the future looks like. And therefore, we look very carefully at startups and work with startups in order to build and create the future together with those companies. Most of the changes have their origin in companies like 3D Industries or others who have a great idea, bring those to market and grow very quickly. And to find a way to turn this into a win-win situation where both parties profit, that's what Next 47 is about. And we do this in a very simple way. We can be a partner where we just work together, find a way to address a customer need where we develop together a proof of concept, be it a new technology, be it new application or whatever. We can invest into the startup, provide this capital that we talked about that often is missing. And in numerous cases, we even found our own startups in order to give the best ideas, be it from inside the company or from outside the company, the right environment to grow quickly and to be profitable and successful in the market.
And then you can also acquire startups and provide exit for the investors so the cycle continues. Now, I'm touching on this issue because it gets talked about quite often, that the fact that we don't have these Googles and Facebooks in Europe, I hate saying that, but is because we don't really have an exit market. We don't really have a lot of corporates in the market, like European corporates buying European startups and having the cycle continue. It's slowly changing, but it hasn't been historically the case. Bart, would you agree with that assessment? Do you think it's very important for that to happen, for Europe to be able to scale these companies?
Yes. But also there, I think we're in a process of things that are getting better. I look today, 10 years ago I was at DLD in Munich, and that was just before DLD acquired SBS. So that was, and at that moment, so I worked at ProSiemens at Eins for a short period, and we started something called Media for Equity. So that was a first step of a media company that invested, at that moment it was a little bit of cash and mainly media return to startups in order to build them. I think they did about around 100 investments in the meantime, and this morning ProSiemens acquired Parship for 300 or 400 million, I don't know. It's a great effort. It took 10 years, and we acquired a couple of other companies at the time from Rocket Internet, and I think we're gonna see more of that. Before ProSiemens, I was at Skynet, and Skynet was kind of the Belgian internet and media arm of Belgacom, now called Proximus. And what we there had, and also kind of liked it, it's something different, but the culture in Skynet was meant to innovate. So it was less about skills or money, but there was, in this big company, an entity. Initially, we were in charge of ADSL and fast internet, and then it became a digital media company, and at the end, we were the entity for digital TV. And it each time kind of worked because there was a culture of innovation. And I think I've now been at the startup side, I was at the corporate side, and it's a tough conversation, because when you're at the corporate side, you have the pressure of the numbers and you have to make your revenue, and then this startup comes always with issues and with 100K revenue after 3 years. So you say, okay, so it always starts out really motivated and let's go for it, and then if there's not a top level commitment, it becomes like an exercise in the margin. And that's now, everybody's going through the second or third cycle. Some are doing VCs, others are doing incubation centers, others are doing investment, but you see it's coming a little bit more to fruition, and ProSiemens is acquiring, but you see more and more potential unicorns in valuation, and a couple of acquisitions later, all these Parship guys, in 2 years they will have left the company, they probably have a 18 months earn-out, take a little bit of rest, and then they will start a new company or help scale another startup at that moment. So indeed, it's part of a cycle.
True. You mentioned culture, which is a topic that I also wanted to address. There's this notion that Europe doesn't have a culture of innovation or entrepreneurship in general. We have great entrepreneurs, I think that's a given. Some of them built really great companies, but I think overall, would the argument still stand that Europeans are not as entrepreneurial as Americans, for example?
I mean, this culture of innovation that has been made a reference to, I think, is existing in Europe as it exists all over the place. But the innovation in Europe is normally done within corporate businesses, and it has been done so far in the B2B area. And this enormous success and this enormous innovation that came over the world, but also over Europe, was a special B2C innovation. And I'm not sure as to whether we have the same cultural basis to do that as the Americans or the Chinese do it. I doubt, because I wanted to ask you the question, now I am asked myself, so I speculate a little bit. But is it not true that in Europe it's not as easy as in the US or as in China to make money out of consumers' data, out of consumers, let's say, situations? I think there is a cultural issue here that makes it sometimes more difficult for these B2C related companies to grow as fastly in Europe as they can do in the US. But with technology going forward and touching the corporate side, and I think a company that uses electricity or energy transportation cannot survive anymore without these innovations. I think corporate and B2C get together, and I think this cultural question will come closer, and we will have clashes in future. I'm quite sure about that. But I would say, to finalize this, we don't have in Europe a problem about innovation, but we have a problem to bring innovation into the markets.
I'd like to add one thought. I'm often wondering whether we are using the right role models and the right goals when we talk about the success of Europe and the overall entrepreneurial scene. First, the discussion is very strongly focused on money only. And secondly, we compare ourselves to the Facebooks and Googles of this world. Now, first of all, I always say maybe a euro of revenue might be more important than a euro of investment for a company to get this foot into the market, to make the first steps. This is often much more difficult to get the first funding and the investment. And secondly, I'm doubting whether we should always look for the next unicorn and the next Facebook and so on. Maybe it's already a very strong contribution to a European success if a company like Siemens or all these other established companies stay competitive and stay at the competitive edge. Take one example. Siemens is a leader in PLM software, where you can design products and design the manufacturing process in order to produce this product. This business has acquired a dozen of young companies in the last years. You would not know the names, and you would not see them in the market anymore because they indeed have been absorbed, which is very typical in a digitalized world. Now, is this success or is it a failure? I regard it as a success, that it helps to keep this cycle alive and keep a traditional player, a successful player in this market. So we should not only look at money, and we should not only look at these greenfield companies that are built from scratch.
I want to go back to the culture issue. Do enough people in Europe want to start their own business in the first place? Do they have what it takes to scale it? And let's maybe get a use case from you. In your direct environment, have you noticed any stigma of failure that people say, oh, what are you doing now? Like, can't you just get a regular job? Or
No. I think that era is well and truly over. I think entrepreneurship is very much accepted as a very positive thing in society. And I think culturally, I would say the discussion really needs to be about the overall ecosystem, not different elements of it. I think all these different stakeholders and players have an important role to play. Every big ecosystem needs a big Siemens, needs a big Google, needs a big Facebook. They need within them to have a solar system of smaller companies that are spinning around them, who are fed from them, and so on and so forth. But it's about getting that overall system right. And I think that Europe probably has an issue, if I'm being honest, with my European brother, with whom I love and I want to criticize constructively. His ecosystem is not quite right. He's missing some key constituent elements that mean the overall system is not humming like the engine in Silicon Valley. It's not humming like the rapid rise of China, the rapid rise of Tel Aviv, the rapid rise of some other ecosystems. So I think Europe really needs to reflect and do it very honestly. And there are key elements that are not working. And some of it, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Is it culturally the reason that things are this way, or are things this way, and therefore the culture has become the way it is? I don't know. But again, I take a very personal experience speaking to investors. An American investor or a Chinese investor talks many magnitudes of figures bigger than his European counterpart when we sit down with them. And the attitude is a lot more aggressive and go-get-'em than the European counterpart. That's just the way it is. And that mindset needs to change.
So it's also about ambition. So I think I would personally argue that wanting to start a company starts way before you can actually start a company. It starts when you're still in school. Do we encourage kids to be entrepreneurial enough? And I know, Andreas, that's something that you care about quite a lot, the education part. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I know best the situation in Germany, and it's true that the part of self-employed people in the economy, unfortunately, is not raising as the other parts of the economy. And I think there is a cultural side in this as well. Entrepreneurial spirit is not as positively seen as in other parts of the world. I mean, this is very general, but if you ask people personally what they would aim at becoming in 10 years, in 20 years' time, it's not that they would say, I would like to start my own business. We have done at European level, but also at German level, and I know that a lot of member states did the same, a lot to incentivize people to try also their own idea to get them work. But this is a long way to go, and these things culturally matter a lot and change very slowly. And I think this is still an issue for the whole European member states.
What about people working for big corporates? If they want to start their own company, Siemens is very open to providing them with investments and other resources to kind of help them get started. But how does it actually work? Does the company get started outside of Siemens? Is it within Siemens? How does that work? How does it work in terms of structure, capital, equity?
Yeah, we are here in a positive sense opportunistic. We are looking for the best ideas that fit certain criteria. So everything that we invest to must be related to the Siemens strategy, be related to this focus on electrification, automation, and digitalization. But it needs to have the potential to disrupt today's business so that we can potentially cannibalize ourselves before somebody else is doing it. It must be of global scalability. And then we need to believe in the team, and the team needs to match certain milestones and some requirements and some criteria. And here we are very open whether the idea comes from the inside of Siemens or from the outside. It's the best ideas we are looking for. And then we have a typical milestone-based approach. So we do it step by step. We start with small numbers, short time frames, and then we would scale up step by step.
Now, I've already alluded to this before, but when I used to have conversations with entrepreneurs in Europe about a decade ago when I started writing about this scene, the typical answer when you would ask, like, what's your biggest barrier to scaling? It would be access to capital in different stages. That conversation has shifted, and now it's almost always access to talent. Everyone knows that there's plenty of technical talent, entrepreneurial talent in Europe. There is a little bit of a shortage on people who have business experience and already have previous companies that have scaled to millions or maybe even billions of users and customers. So that's where the talent is lacking, according to the scale-ups that I talked to at least. So how is that problem perceived by you, and how do you think we can solve it? Whoever wants to take it. Andreas, you want?
I mean, the situation with engineers, if you have a worldwide view on it, I mean, I saw it in South Korea, where you have thousands of engineers working at the same station for a same product that has to be launched in some months. I think Europe, with the current variation of cities and of structures, is not allowing in the same manner as we have it in other parts of the world to centralize these engineering activities as it is done also in China, for example. And secondly, unfortunately, also these student studies of engineering and others have unfortunately not seen the same level of ambition as it has been in other parts of the world. So I think engineering should become, again in Europe, really a key talent where we invest more in. But we talk about that also since quite a while, and we haven't yet have the success in study programs to get there. And I think it's very helpful if companies like Siemens take the opportunity. But on the other side, this does in a certain way limit our own strengths. And in that sense, I think these businesses that will rely on new technologies in the future from the C2C world, from the B2B world, sorry, they should invest also themselves more in these general engineering capacities to launch young people into that path of career, because that will in the end bring the fruits that we need at the moment.
Bart, would love your comments as well. You've worked as an executive in big corporates, you worked for startups, and now you invest in startups. So I'm sure you have a very nice perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I think, yes. I think that all elements are here. I really think that in Europe, all elements to make it a successful entrepreneurial region are here. We just need to speed it up. I think it's just that, speed it up and have the ambition. And I had a little bit unfortunate also examples on it. For example, in Belgium, we had a social network that was doing really well in Europe, being compared, Netlog it was called at the time, it was compared to European Facebook. And I know that I was on the board at that time and helped them in scaling. And I know it was really difficult in Belgium to find money, so we found Index, who were in Switzerland then or in UK, was one of the largest capital raises, 5 million. We had a big party, and the week after, our competitor at the time, Facebook, announced 180 million. And it was like, okay, that was game over. And I think if you look at that, when I was in Silicon Valley, because it's just a stuff and they have just as much issues over there than they have here. If you want to hire an engineer, he's there, but he's doing 3 other startups in the weekend and being recruited by 5 Google. There's other issues but what they do is, I have kind of the feeling that, or what I saw is that they select winners. At a certain moment, you have some companies that are emerging. Often it's US ones. Then we take some time to fund them and proof of concept and prove in a country, and it takes eternally.
Exactly right.
And then US, they say, okay, YouTube is a potential winner. Let's invest 300 million in YouTube. There's a winner. Facebook, go to all these. I take now the digital or the platform-related businesses, but at a certain moment they select and the VCs, they team up, they put a lot of money in it, and then they start searching for the team. Very often, if you look at one of the VCs I like a lot is Andreessen Horowitz, because they're also former entrepreneurs become investors. I think that would help a lot. I'm in charge of Angel.me, which is kind of it's a crowdfunding platform and an angel investor network, and we're launching VentureWise beginning of the year, which is a fund specifically for tech. And I believe a lot in that. Team it all up, put people quicker through a timeline. Tell them that they should raise now or invest even before they have to do their 6 months fundraising round, because entrepreneurs lose so much money and so much time in it. And you're right that they usually find the financing, but it takes too much time. And by the time that they have it and then have to put the teams in work, we're bypassed again. East or west, often at this time. So it's, I think, getting it all together and doing it faster. And it will result in companies that will do great, and we should celebrate it, and companies that will fail, and we should celebrate it just as much. Not as much, a little bit less, but still.
Yeah, it's true. It's also, I mean, if you raise that much more funding in the US, you can pay top dollar for the best of the best, and one good person might save you hiring 10 people, for the same amount of money. So a lot of European startups make that mistake.
But what I also think is that because you talk about 10 years ago, and remember when I left as kind of an executive to the US, who are you? And then I said, I was CEO of this and VP of that. I say, okay, yeah, who cares? Okay, what are your new ideas? I said, yeah, I'm doing a new startup in that. Oh, great, cool. And then I came back to Europe each time, and I said, yeah, what are you doing? Yeah, this new startup. Yeah, what else? That's it. So, but that has changed. Yeah, I think that is really already a mind shift, and even I think some of the startups are a little bit over-communicated before they do a lot, but okay, we're catching up. We're catching up, and I think that atmosphere, there's a lot of great entrepreneurs, there's a lot of corporates who are looking at startups in a completely different way. As a startup, you have to know you have to drive the process. You have your initial buy-in, but then as a startup, you have to manage your corporate. And I see a corporate contract is the same as a financing round. It takes a lot of time. You have to manage, like you manage the VC, you have to manage your corporate level. But once that you get it going, you have and your revenue and you're embedded. And it can be just as much as a financing round can be a contract with a large corporate. And that the US has perfectly seen. And then maybe one other thing to end is we also look a lot at, when you talked about politics or what can Europe do. 5 years ago, when you ask what can Europe do, it would be a get out of the way kind of answer. And that is changing also. Yeah, I think that Europe can do what EIF and EIB are doing. It's financing related. There's quite some subsidy programs, and at a certain moment, all entrepreneurs are quite negative about subsidies. And I'm not. It used to be negative. If you look at, if I would ask around who is the world's most celebrated entrepreneur, we will all probably say Elon Musk. The guy does rocket cars and the subway station in the weekend. It's kind of incredible. But without government subsidies, he would not be there. He got subsidies to save Tesla, and he got the NASA to buy into. So it's the government who provides the home to the most entrepreneurial person we probably know. Still, we look at it in a negative way in Europe.
Yeah, I also like to argue that Silicon Valley 70 years ago was kind of, the foundation of it was built through military spending in the US as well. So people tend to forget that part of Silicon Valley. But Tina, I saw you nodding in agreement with a lot of what Bart was saying, so would love your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think that it goes exactly to the point I was trying to make, that the attitude in other parts of the world where we've seen big success is, let's just get on with it, and let's get on with it quickly. And we believe in you. Our gut says this is good. Let's throw our money where it's a gamble. There's an element of well-calculated risk, and that's the whole point of entrepreneurship and venture capital to a great extent. Because otherwise, it's not. You're financing against known assets or known revenue, and that's boring. What you're actually trying to do is to create something that, if everyone knew was going to exist, then it wouldn't be so interesting, and it wouldn't be so new, and it wouldn't be so cutting edge. So, and that attitude we see in the States, in certain parts of the States. We see it now in China. We don't see it as much across Europe. We just don't. And I think that's the main blocker here.
Although I would differentiate in the lack of what you see and what you don't see in Europe, I think what I'm increasingly seeing is entrepreneurial aspiration. What we don't have yet so much compared to other ecosystems is entrepreneurial experience. So we don't have this large base of serial entrepreneurs, of people who have done it a number of times, who have gone through the cycle, who have made a successful company or have failed and gained their experience from that. So there is a positive element in it that I see a lot of change. I see that people are becoming more and more entrepreneurial. But we have to catch up with the experience.
That's typically the cycle that takes time. You can't really accelerate that, and experience only comes with time, right? So that's kind of the issue, that a lot of these changes you can push through, but then you still need to wait for the talent to catch up. Is that something you already noticed when you were building your company?
The talent issue?
Yes.
We started off as a very international team, and we continue.
Or the companies that you were at before, because you've done a few before.
Yes. Talent, yes, I think there is a missing middle layer of management, which is that knowledge base, that experience base around high growth companies. That is true. We've overcome that by just leveraging the fact that it's a flat world and you can take people from wherever. So our team extends from the US right through to China. But yes, I would say, but I also see it as symptomatic of the same issue of lack of the vision and the attitude, combined with lack of the experience, and that's a sort of unfortunately negative cycle until someone breaks out of that vicious cycle. But I would also say one danger of some of this aspirational talk, if I may, is that sometimes it becomes quite dangerous because it becomes lip service and is not backed up with actual levers and policy levers and operational mechanisms to make it happen. And then you end up in a situation with lots of marketing campaigns and everyone talks about it, but nothing actually comes of it. And that's dangerous again. That's very dangerous. Thank you. To my one fan in the crowd.
It always starts with one. Join in if you can.
I take the point 100%, but I think I have to contradict in one sense. I mean, it's still, first of all, not a political aim to create jobs. It's the aim of the business world to create jobs. And what policy can do is to facilitate this.
This wasn't targeted at you, by
No, I agree. But I think in this sense, it's a common concern that we don't get where we want to be. And it's true, and we were talking about Silicon Valley being founded by defense investment in the 70s. That is unfortunately another example where in your European Union, first of all, we have much less high-end investment in that area. And secondly, we then send it around into 28 different member states. And it's a big loss of money, but that alone would not solve the problem neither. So I think the whole ecosystem, the political ecosystem, is not yet in a position to deliver 100%.
No, and it wasn't just targeted. It's at the whole system. I think in the system, entrepreneurs can talk and not deliver. Politicians can talk and not deliver. Strategics can talk and not deliver. So we all have to, I think, keep check on each other. That this is not just, entrepreneurship is the new hot topic to discuss. So let's talk about it. Who's walking the walk? Tel Aviv is walking the walk. China is walking the walk. Silicon Valley continues to walk the walk. And we have to understand how they do it. And it is, I think, to your point, it's strategic thinking. These countries don't mess about with level playing fields, as someone pointed out earlier. In the UK, we were struggling with this, and I don't want to create political tension here. We've already seen the danger of that. But, I'm not a fan of Brexit. I'm not a fan of Brexit whatsoever. But one of the points people have raised about the UK leaving is that now they have free rein to do whatever they want to make London a centre for attracting companies from across Europe. Now, some people talked about other countries trying to pull people away from London, but actually I think it might work in reverse, because the prices are dropping, which is not a nice thing to say, but in reality it means finance will move in that direction, as you saw with SoftBank buying Arm and various other big transactions. But the point being that they can break away from this levelization, and it's just a point. I'm not a Brexit fan. I saw some people upset about that. I'm not a Brexit fan at all. I was pro staying in, but it's that idea of being strategic. So either Europe gets it together and says we're going to be strategic and here's how we do it, or they're going to get outmaneuvered by China and Israel and the US.
Counterpoint?
I mean, no, it's true. They were ready to take a risk, a big risk, from my point of view, and we will see how it works out. I have a lot of doubts, but the calculation or the way that you have described may also be a way where you can take their own risk into your own hands in a globalized world. I think that this might be very dangerous, but everyone can decide.
As a disclaimer, I totally did not mean to derail this. It's not about Brexit, but it's only about the thinking behind strategically deciding on not waiting to, not subsidize this group because you're not subsidizing that part of the country, or not supporting with government investment here because it's not being done over there. You just decide that this is the winner and you throw your money behind that. And you should be Munich. Who knows?
Because when you always try to balance, that means someone else is going to pass you.
Exactly.
And I agree with your point. It's not only politics. It's not only about political institutions who have to carry the load. It's also the corporates. That is one of the motivations why we founded Next 47, because we also have to fight for the talent, for the best people, and people are now looking for an entrepreneurial environment. They don't want to work in strict hierarchies and bureaucratic environments. They want to have entrepreneurial freedom, and they want to do something that is purposeful. And that is one thing why we've set up this Next 47 group, because it's providing this entrepreneurial environment, and at the same time we strongly believe that what Siemens is doing by providing electricity to mankind, by providing healthcare to mankind, and many things more that are really substantial, we can make a difference, can provide this purposeful environment.
Not unimportant. We've talked about culture, access to capital, access to talent. Access to market is another big issue. Now, the digital single market proposals are on the table, they're being discussed. But I always wonder, like, an average startup in Europe, or an average corporate in Europe for that matter, is that really on their minds? Like, do they even follow the news on the digital single market? Is it an issue for them? Is it a real tangible issue for them? Do they think about it? That's what I always wonder about. Bart, is DSM on your mind ever?
Sometimes. Yeah, it depends. In one of the things I do, it's quite active. I'm vice chairman of the European Crowdfunding Network, and of course, there it's a very important element. In the day-to-day business, probably less, because we're all locked into our own countries at this moment. The moment that it opens up, it's going to create so much opportunities that it'll become on everybody's mind. But of course, everybody's now surviving and doing his day-to-day. Policy-wise, I think a lot of people are working on it, yeah.
Well, I guess if you're a startup waiting for the DSM to happen and then acting, it's kind of...
I think a lot of startups also know, well, what can I do to change it? You kind of surf the wave that's ahead and try often not to make it. Catching the wave when it's there is already tough enough. Be there at the right moment and get everything in place the moment that it arrives. I think most startups or companies are looking at it that way.
Sina, is that the feeling you have? You can't really change anything as a startup?
No, it's not. We don't think about it all the time, but it's something to be aware of.
Same.
So that brings me to you.
I mean, politics has never promised in Europe that with the digital single market to be done legally, everything will be fine. It's a process, it's a gradual process, and we know about the complexity of interaction between member states and their own responsibilities for example, in tax law, with community law in state aid area, and this is all very complicated, and I think it would be totally wrong telling the public we will do that and it will work. No, first of all, because we can only set the conditions, and these conditions then have to be used. So I think there are important steps in it, but it's a long way to go, and we hope that we do the right steps to compete at global level in the right time.
Suppose that we get there, we have a digital single market. What's next? What's the next move?
I mean, I'm very optimistic that in the B2C world, in the B2B world, in the industry, in the corporate world, Europe can, if they really absorb quickly a lot of these innovative startups, be very competitive and a global leader. But this is to be done by corporates and by business people. But this is something what I observe is a chance that the European Union and European companies very strongly have.
Will be interesting to watch. We're out of time. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you.